When you look at all these lovely conifer bonsai around here, look at this beautiful Sabina, for instance. That's a juniper. That's a juniper. And then we've got these pines, all sorts of different pines, and you see them in all these beautiful conditions and state. And a lot of people don't seem to realize that they start off life as quite young plants and quite unrecognizable as bonsai. So let me use this as an introduction to tell you about how we make bonsai from ordinary conifers. Conifers are very popular because they're evergreen. The Oriental people, like the Chinese and Japanese, they're great believers in the evergreens because they are serene and they are symbols of longevity. Conifers usually outlive the deciduous trees, so I was told. And for that reason, they're very superstitious and they love growing conifers as bonsai. So I'm going to talk about how we start off bonsai from conifers, which you can get from garden centers. So let me show you our stock of conifers. So I have here conifers of different ilk, different types. These are all different types of rare Austrian pines. This, if I may remind you, is a Bouverensis pine, which is a sylvestris, and we made it from raw material like this. So this is a Bouverensis. From this we made that, and that's only 1 or 2 years in the making. So they all start off somewhere, and the progression is also very interesting to watch. So you can see all these different pines. Some of them have more potential than others. Simply lifting any pine, you can still see that, you can see why they're so easy to make. This, I think, in 10 minutes I could turn it into a bonsai because the shape is already there. So if you look at all these different trees, they all have different degrees of potential. Some are easier than others, but I'm now going to show you some very difficult junipers. So we'll go to another area. We will talk about a juniper, Virginia Grey Owl, which is not a chinensis, but a Virginia juniper. So we'll go to another area. So look at all these junipers I've got. I've got masses of them. So this is what we call the Juniper Grey Owl. So Juniper Grey Owl is, in fact, a Virginia juniper. So if you look at them, every one is interesting. So when we go to nurseries, or when you go to nurseries, what you look for when you're looking for raw material is look for these interesting trunks. Every tree has an interesting trunk. So every tree would turn out different. If I took all these trees, they would all turn out to be different trees. So this has got potential, that's got potential. Let's find one which is more difficult than the rest. So again, this looks a challenging one. Everyone is challenging, isn't it? Look at the size of them. Let me find another bigger one. Let's see if there's an even bigger one. So that's another big one. Look at this big beast. How about that? That's interesting, isn't it? That looks very interesting. Look at that. So let us work on this, and then if we have time, we will work on some of these. So it just shows you what we can do with all of these. So let us walk into the back greenhouse and work on these two. There we go. So we have here these two large Virginia juniper, Juniperus virginiana grey owl. And typical of all junipers, they have these lovely juniper berries. Juniper berries are used for cooking, and you can use them for making gin or whatever. So you can in fact sow the seeds and get plants from juniper berries. So a little bit about the cultivation. You can even make cuttings from them. They grow very easily from cuttings. Now let me describe to you botanically what the Virginia juniper does. So Juniperus Virginia Grey Owl, fairly large spreader with silver grey green foliage, up to 2 to 3 meters spread in 10 years. It's a useful ground cover plant for large areas. I will take you at the end of this demonstration to our field where we've got some Juniper Grey Owl that I purchased in 1980 when I lived in my previous house in Purley, and they are already about I would say 10, 12 feet across, and they've been constantly pruned every year for the last 1980 makes it what? 44 years I've been looking after those. So they're massive ones. So this is relatively young. I would say that these plants may be 15 years, could be more, but about that. So how do we tackle a tree like this? Obviously, they have interesting trunks and you can make many things with it. Let's look at each of these in turn before you get confused. And I always do the first thing, which is to take it out of the pot, look for the trunk. So this routine, by the time you've seen the many I've done, should give you some clue as to how I approach doing these things. So these things need to be yanked out of the pot because I want to get to look at the roots. There you go. You see how vigorously they grow. A word about the compost. So much confusion. People say you've got to grow trees in akadama and this and that. Now these conifers grown in nurseries, they just grow it in ordinary compost. And in the olden days, we used to use peat, but now it is just rotted vegetable matter. And this is the compost they seem to thrive on. Look at the vigorous roots. So if you planted your bonsai in this compost, I dare say they would continue to grow quite successfully. Now, what are the options on a tree like that? Looking at the trunk, you can see that the obvious thing is to make it a cascade like that with a little head, and it'll be a very viable cascade. So that is one option. Let me place it in a training pot to change the angle. So if I place it at, say, this angle, just because it's growing out of the pot like this, it doesn't mean to say that it should live throughout its life as a tree at that angle. So I could make an informal upright tree with a beautiful bend like that, and another branch there, and a lot of gin, and I could get an informal upright tree like that. So can you see the potential there? So I've got a ready-made S shape there, like so. I'm really spoiled for choice. I mentioned in another video I did earlier this week, when I was doing a demonstration with Paul Katanak. He was a buddy of mine going back to 1980. And we did a squamata juniper, and we create a semi-cascade, exactly this sort of style. Okay, so that is what we can do with this one. So you're really spoiled for choice because there's so many different options that you can get out of this tree. So you've got to really choose, or whoever buys a tree like that, got to decide what they would prefer. Would they prefer a semi-cascade tree, or would they prefer a more upright tree? You can do anything. You see the endless possibilities, endless possibilities. So this is what goes through my mind. I think a lot of you like my videos because I explain my thought process. I'm explaining to you what I'm thinking, what goes through my mind. How am I analyzing this tree? Out of the pot at one particular angle doesn't mean that it's going to end up as a bonsai growing like that. You know, it doesn't need to be a bonsai like that. So it could be all sorts of different angles. So that is a possible angle. So we are saying we could make a cascade like that. So it's literally like, you know, tossing a coin and then saying, you know, what shall we choose? What shall we choose to do with it? We can make it do anything. And remember also, we try to keep these thin branches. Many people, when they get a tree like this, they get greedy and say, oh, let's use all the thick branches. But if you want to make a tree which has scale, that means the trunk is in keeping with the thickness of the branches. If you use the thin branches, it makes the trunk look thicker. So we bear that in mind. So we're not going to cut all these off, we're going to keep them. So once we decide what to do, we can then proceed with our plan of action. So I'm seeing how pliable this is, because if I were to make this a cascade, I need a little top for this. I've got to see how the nebari goes into the ground as well. So because this is such a interesting looking branch for a cascade, it could be quite interesting as a cascade.
If we lost this one, Peter, you get good taper in this. We'll make the head out the skinnier one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, these are easier to make into a bendy bit.
Yeah.
You see over here, that is like two heads, isn't it? Two branches
Yeah.
going there, so you can pull this out. Can you see that? Two branches there. So that's a bit deceptive. We need to separate these two.
Yeah.
So that has to be separated. Like so. See, this side, if you wanted to make an informal upright tree, this side is possible. Informal upright tree is too common, isn't it? There's two a penny informal upright. So I think,
like this because cascade.
yeah, but this strong point of this tree is this long sweeping branch this way.
Yeah.
So we can make the head certainly with that portion, and then this thick portion we probably get rid of and make it into gin or driftwood. So let us bite the bullet, as we say. Let us take the obvious branches which are not usable, like anything hanging down. Okay, we've now decided. First decision is that we're going to make it a cascade or semi-cascade. So we're going to use this. So anything hanging down, to save the confusion, we're going to take off. Something too low if it's going to be semi-cascade. These can be sacrificials, but I don't really need those. Certainly don't need this bit. This is going to come off. We can have a look. See that branch there? I don't need that, so I'm going to keep a little stub in case I want to make gin out of that. Okay, so we are talking of method of elimination. The more we eliminate, the less of a problem we have left. Okay, so this long branch is going to come off. Okay, you can see how this thing is evolving right in front of your eyes. And we said that this is too thick to use, so this will probably end up as a gin. So these are all going to be ginned. So less confusion again. So these will be ginned. So that's give you a taste of what it will be like. So gin pliers, may I remind you, does this, crush the bark, and by crushing the bark, the wood just peels off and you get the driftwood effect. And then we can refine it with carving tools, Dremels, or whatever you like, and then it will come good. So taking that big branch out of the way has simplified it a little bit, less confusion. So we're still looking to take this down, and that's going to be the head. I won't rush to cut that off. So I more or less know where I'm going now. So the rest is just using thick wire, and with thick wire we will see what bend we can get with that cascading branch. In the earlier video I did with my friend Paul Katanak, where we showed making a semi-cascade juniper out of squamata. That only took us 10 minutes. This is going to take more than that. This is more complicated. Certainly more complicated. So, we're going to use this and this to go up. So we're going to use quite thick wire for this, to bend this. So we're going to stop for a while, and I'm going to do the filming, and I'm going to get Josh, who's the camera operator today, to wire this branch with this one up to about here. So this one to there. As I've sometimes said, very often the cost of the wire is more than the cost of the tree. We're now proceeding to wire some of the branches at the top to make a little head, which in effect will be a small bonsai tree. The other way, no, you need to bring the wire this way.
Over the top.
Yeah. Also across.
Yeah.
That's right. Make sure you have enough to go there.
Yeah.
May not be enough, is it? Enough to go, just space the wire. You may not have enough.
For this one? Yeah.
Okay. Maybe a little more. It's not long enough. Otherwise you'll be cutting this one.
Okay.
Always plan the use of wire. The grey owl is not a variety often used for making bonsai, but it has cord-like foliage. The foliage is very similar to the Chinese elm, so sometimes confused with the Chinese elm. People buy this in garden centers, say, oh, this is a Chinese elm. It's not, but you can still use it. But it's more floppy than the Chinese elm that we use. The Kisu is a little tighter than this, and Itoigawa is quite different, of course. But this is what we call the cord-like foliage, not the prickly foliage. Many junipers have two types of foliage, both prickly and what you call it, the cord-like. So this is a procumbens juniper. You see, this is what we call prickly foliage, pokey foliage. There used to be a time when we used to teach people to wire every possible branch in sight. And once you've wired everything, you can just place all the branches as you wish. Just to create a head, and then we get a very nice looking, logical arrangement of branches to form the branches for the head or the top. So let me show you what we've done. All we've pruned off so far is that little bit, only that little bit. But what the wire has done, we have defined the shape of the cascade. We haven't taken much else, we've taken only a few twigs. This was the main thing which we ginned, which was confusing. We wired some of the branches. Now we'll proceed to arrange some of the branches and do some more wiring. So this main cascading branch, we can arrange the branches to make pads like this, like herringbone shape. We'll refine it by wiring it like this. Some of these long branches are a bit confusing. We shorten those. If there are too many branches like this one, we take off. This one can be confusing. This we take off, and Let me arrange some of the top work here. So we've wired everything, so we've wired this, so let's make a head out of that. This can go to the back. The only trouble with this variety of juniper is that the branches tend to flop, so we need to assist it by wiring them to stand flat or to be flat. It reminds me of a juniper in Japan which they call the Tohoku juniper, very floppy juniper. They have this habit of flopping around. And again, if you look at this pad here, how I decide there are two branches in parallel there, and obviously I don't want both of them, I only need one. So which one do I take? Probably the lower one. I can leave a little bit for making gin if I wish. So that and that would be paired together. We will do the detail wiring in a minute, so that will form the pad. So these will all form pads like this. And as I said, I didn't bother to put raffia around the trunk because I knew I wasn't going to split it, so I don't think we split it, so it should be okay. Now when we come to this is going to be the head, and we had these two branches spare. Because I want to show the trunk, I think I can take it off quite safely, and I could use it as sacrificial, but I don't think we need too many sacrificials. So I'm going to a bit long, but I'm going to shorten it and then show you how we break it. So I make a little sloping cut at the back to initiate the cut. So this is just to initiate the cut, sloping cut, and then we will tear the wood. You can do it with the gin pliers, or you can do it with your fingers to bend it back. So this is easier. So like that, if I do that, I can just rip the wood back like so, to get that effect, the wood texture showing. I didn't want to rip it too far back in case it tears into the live vein. So you get the idea. Again, like so. So those two branches serve that purpose. And then there are still too many branches. See, there are two there. Let's take that one off. So we're just rationalizing the branches. So we're going to wire these in a minute. Wire these. And so, as I said, the top is like a small bonsai. Small informal upright tree. Pity these foliage and branches are so floppy, but you can still use something. I'm removing these small little branchlets which are clouding the trunk. Show the trunk more. So you can see how the shape is coming along. If this is very straight, you can always use the heat bending method and bend the gin so that they're shorter. If you didn't like it so long, you can cut it off and make it shorter. But that's only a point of refinement. You can decide on that later on. So the front is somewhere here, looking at it like this. So you get that nice round head. Got to ask ourselves, do I need this or not? As we say, sometimes you got to bite the bullet. Do we need it or not? We probably don't need it, isn't it? Again, showing the trunk is more important than having too much clutter there. So, in a matter of a few minutes, we've created the basic shape. Now it's up to us to do fine wiring to wire these into pads. So we're going to do this and show it to you again. Let me just show you how I decide on selecting the branches to make into the pad. So if you look at this one here, you see how it's alternating from this and that. So I've wired this, now I've got a situation here now. Now this one is tempted to use this one because this is the next step. But if I use that, it becomes too cluttered. But if I remove that, can you see it leaves a nice space? So although the transition from this to this is on the same side, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as long as the space is there and it doesn't look too cluttered. So I've taken that off. So this and this is going to be on the safe side, same side, and then the next one will be this one here, or perhaps even this one. So we're going to wire. Let's try these two and see what happens. These two. So that's how we decide on leaving the spacing. So we got to do all of these in the same way. We got to judge what to keep and what not to keep. So you can see how the pad formation is coming along. All right. Trying to get this juniper into this pot, the nearest pot I can find, ceramic semi-cascade pot or cascade pot. So I'm going to tease the roots, so rather than waste my time, look at this luxurious growth of root, absolutely smothered with root. So with such a lot of root, I don't have to bother even teasing it. Let me just cut that off. People used to laugh at me. People still laugh at me when I do this, but I have the last laugh because I know the tree won't suffer. This is quite acceptable. I always used to call it cutting cake. Saves a lot of labor. And I'm not going to hurt the tree because, as I said, there is such a lot of root that just cutting a bit off won't hurt the tree. That, by the way, is an old, dull, blunt, silky saw. I haven't got to the very bottom yet. I dare say there could be quite interesting root there. Look at how beautifully we've arranged the branches of the cascading section.
It looks good from all sides, Peter.
I'm doing it in the month of August. And I know that with junipers I can get away with it because I'm not cutting much root. I'm just going to try and rearrange the root ball. I only cut a little bit. So this is possible. You can do this without harming the tree. So there's still a lot of root to take off to get it into that pot. In fact, if I stress it too much, I may need to use another pot. So I thought that this pot, although it's the right size, it's too small. And I would have to cut a lot of this root off, which on the 2nd of August, which is right in the middle of summer, it's not a wise thing to do. So you got to be discreet and probably use this pot instead. It's a plastic training pot. So we're going to get it into this pot and we'll show you the end result after I've got it into this pot, okay? I thought I'd show you what grey owl can become when they are grown in the ground. So this tree, which you can see it's a spread of almost a meter, and the trunk is already about an inch thick. That means about 2 or 3 centimeters thick. But look at this one. This is also a grey owl. And this one I purchased in 1980 from a British conifer nursery in Woking, and I grew it in the ground when I lived in Purley, my previous house, from 1980 to 85. And then I brought it to Herons, and I planted at Herons for the next 10 years. So it was field grown for 20 years altogether. Then it was dug up and put in a pot. And look at the size of the trunk of this grey owl. And as you can see, it's got that grey foliage. That's why it's called grey owl. And the spiky ends at the back. So that's the nature of the tree. And if you keep pruning the ends, it does bud back. And this is the tree that I'm trying to make into a large bonsai. So, as you know, I love these large trees. And if you grow them in the ground, they will become even bigger. So, there is such a lot of possibility and potential from using grey owl. There you go. So, I have two more grey owls which I bought in 1980, and that means these are 40 something years old. Look at it, look at the trunk. Look at it. So this was dug up about 10 years ago from the ground and then started shaping it. I took some major decisions, cut some thick branches off and created this shape. So these, although are not bonsai, they will become useful as garden trees. So they're trained in bonsai with pads. You can see how the pads are formed. And these are all at least 5'6", if not 6 foot tall. So this is grey owl. If it is trained like this and allowed to get big. So you can see how we can use different types of juniper. So I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll work on some more grey owls because they all have different potential for different shapes. So there you go. So here we are. After about half an hour's work, we managed to wire literally everything. So the main trunk was wired with just 4mm wire, and that one strand, one coil of that was able to bend from here to there. I added some thinner 2mm wire to create the double S at the top. Now these pads are very interesting. What I'd done, instead of taking it straight out, I went up and then came down. So you can see it went up like that and came down. So this goes up and down. Same with this has come like a waterfall, down, then straight, down and then straight. So there's cascading waterfall. So every bit has been wired. As I said, this gin could be bent with heat should I not like it, like that. But whoever buys it, if they like it, they can keep it. If not, I won't. I did mention that this particular variety called grey owl has very floppy foliage, like the Japanese Chinese juniper, which is called Tohoku. It's a very floppy juniper, very difficult to wire, but it works. If you keep the wire on, it works. And then you have a look at the pads. You see how the pads have been done. All alternating branches to form the pad, and every single one has been wired to give it that form. So the cascade in this instance was the obvious choice to use. But should I not want a cascade, I can cut the tree off. Let me bring a bag or a towel and show you what I mean. So sometimes what we call the bag trick is like that. If I didn't want a cascade, I can cut it off there and have an informal upright tree like that. So that would also work because cascade is not everyone's cup of tea. So there you go. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing this. So the object lesson is this: to find the solution, and then because it's a very floppy type of juniper, we've wired every single twig. Now we always say that a tree should look nice from every side, and looking at the tree, this also looks nice from this side. If I use this as the front, I can bring the cascade more this way, like that. So anything is possible. So this tree has two possible fronts. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and was able to take something from it.